From the TVW studio, it's Inside Olympia with host Austin Jenkins.
Welcome to Inside Olympia. Washington's state and local governments have limited resources to address myriad public policy challenges. Ensuring that taxpayers get bang for their buck and that programs accomplish what they're supposed to is a key role of the state auditor's office. It's a role that takes on even greater importance in an era of declining trust in government. So how is the state auditor working to bring accountability and transparency to government? What are the ways in which the office is retooling its mission to meet the moment? And what are some of its recent audit findings? For the full hour this week, we go in depth with the state auditor's office. Joining me now is the elected state auditor, Pat McCarthy, and Jim Brownell, the assistant director for state audit and special investigations. Welcome both of you to Inside Olympia. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Before we begin, a little background about Auditor McCarthy and her office. Pat McCarthy is Washington's 11th state auditor and the first woman to hold the office. She's a Democrat who first took office in 2017 and is currently serving her third term. Previously, she was Pierce County Executive, Pierce County Auditor, and President of the Tacoma School Board. The State Auditor's Office conducts accountability audits, financial audits, audits of federal spending, and produces annual comprehensive financial reports of each government in Washington. It also performs cybersecurity and IT audits, and it conducts special investigations of fraud and whistleblower complaints. I'm always surprised at sort of the breadth and width of the office's responsibilities. But I want to begin with acknowledging the times we're in and how your office fits into this moment. We know that we are in an era of declining trust in government and institutions. Mm-hmm. We know that we're in tight budget times when the state needs to make those dollars stretch even further. And we are in an increasingly complex environment with technology, the arrival of AI, which for instance makes fraud and cybersecurity even a higher concern. So when you pull all of that together and you think about the role of this constitutional office, how are you trying to retool or modernize or reframe the work for the times we're in?
Well, like you mentioned, and giving a little bit of my history, I come out of local government and was audited a lot in those different capacities where I served in different governmental entities. And I will tell you that it's important for me as the state auditor to understand that world, and I've learned to understand the state agency world as well. And we're fortunate in Washington State. This office was designed in many, many years ago when we just became a state, and so we need to be proud of that, that effort. And it has expanded. Our portfolio has expanded, if you will. And one of the things I really wanted to accomplish when I first walked in the door is to make the work that we did in the state auditor's office and the reports that we issued to be more transparent, more understandable to the general citizen in Washington State. So in that endeavor, we've worked very hard to make our website, which I'd highly encourage people to go to our website. I know it's not a website everybody runs to, but it really is more modern, it's user-friendly, and we have some great tools. Tools not only for our clients, which are local governments, we have over 2,000 of them that we audit, but the public in general, the legislature, and of course the media as well. So our goal is to be that good communicator, to be that trusted source, so that people know that they could come to the state auditor's office and get the facts. And that's an important word in our world. You know, we talk a lot about trust but verify. So I think it's important to know that last year alone we audited almost 3,000 governments in Washington. So that's a lot of auditing. We have about 500 people that work in our office with a lot of different backgrounds, depending on whether they're working in cybersecurity, data analytics, auditing, financial auditing, and whether it's at the state or the local level. So we try to get as much information into the public's hands. So our FIT tool, our infographics that we've been doing since 2018 that really show the state of the state and its financial health is really good for the public to know it's out there.
Because you are in your third term and you've seen sort of this evolution of the, kind of the environment in which people are thinking about government and institutions, and then you add in also these really vexing, hard to solve problems like homelessness and housing, for instance, where more money is being spent. Another example would be mental health care. More money is being spent, but we don't always see very quick results. How are you thinking about the need to identify and verify whether money is being well spent? We've invested a lot more in a lot of areas. And yet I think the public is often very frustrated because they look around and they say, I don't see a difference.
Yeah, well, we do performance auditing where we're looking at the efficiency of how government is operating. But our financial audits will also give a picture, a window, if you will, into how government is spending those dollars. And you don't have to rely on hearsay. It's actually very factual. And it is easy to navigate on our website. So these kinds of things that I'm talking about, we do legislative briefings, we do rotaries, we do everything we can to get the public to understand the breadth of what we do in the state auditor's office. And so we do a variety of things. Our accountability audits are like compliance audits. Did they follow the Open Public Meetings Act? Did they follow all their rules and laws and procedures and processes or state law that they are required to do as a governmental entity? Whether you're a mosquito district from Eastern Washington or you're King County, or whether you're DSHS, or whether you're a small commission, we're going to audit you.
Let's bring you into the conversation, Jim, and talk about, you're the Assistant Director for State Audit and Special Investigations. Tell us a little bit about the hat you wear, and let's dive in a little bit deeper to the work that the State Auditor's Office does on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, thank you. Great to be here. So our flagship audit is known as the ACFR, the Annual Financial Comprehensive Report for the state. So that's the state of Washington's full set of financial statements. It's hundreds of pages, and we audit that every year.
And what is that really looking at and telling? Is that all of the enterprise of state government, all of the agencies? What are you looking for?
That's exactly it.
Is every dollar accounted for?
All of the dollars under the purview of Washington state government is within that book of audit that we conduct every year, and it's published in December. Our most recent one covered 2025, and that came out December this last year. So we look at all of the financial activity that all of our state agencies spend and collect.
And why is this important, and what are you looking for? What might the audit flag?
The audit would flag if the financial statements are misstated. So that's the most important thing. We're giving an opinion about whether the financial information is accurate and complete. And that's used by bond issuers. That's the most important thing. If we want to borrow money as a state, they want to know that our finances are accurate and reliable. So
basically this is like if it was a company, you're looking at the books to make sure that everything
exactly
lines up.
Yep.
Yeah. And again, we have an infograph that is interactive. So if you go on, we've had that infograph for each year since 2018 to actually look at this, what we call the ACFR, to be able to work through it to see what that year looked like for Washington State.
And generally, how compliant are we as a state? What does this audit typically reveal?
We're very compliant over my tenure of about 20 years. Every now and then we'll have some significant findings, but nothing that would cause us serious concern about the state's financial statements and how they're presented.
So that's the thing you have to do every year.
Correct.
That's the big audit. What's number 2, number 3 on your list?
Yeah. Number 2 is our federal audit. It's known as the statewide single audit. So this is an audit of all of the federal spending done by state agencies in Washington. So in 2025, the total federal spending was just under $30 billion. So we audit about 80% of that money as part of that audit.
I mean, one thing we can think about when it comes to the state budget, that we talk about state spending, but usually there is about as much in federal spending that's also happening, or federal dollars that are coming to the state. And obviously a program like Medicaid is a dollar-for-dollar matching program. So there's a lot of federal money flowing through a state like ours.
And there was
Definitely.
a lot of federal money coming in during COVID.
During COVID.
So
Yes, and a lot of money being
we did a lot
misspent
more
during that time.
audits during that time period.
Yeah.
So now we're in post-COVID, but during COVID, it was a lot.
I'm sure that would be, yeah, there was like a flood of money coming in.
We also have accountability audits that's been mentioned, where those are compliance-based and really looking at internal controls at state agencies, making sure that they are safeguarding public funds. So we audit every agency at least every 4 years. You know, we've got smaller agencies, but then the larger ones like Healthcare Authority or DCYF, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, we will audit them every year for that type of audit.
Performance audits, I think, get a lot of attention because they're not the boring financial audits. There is this program working. We took a look and we can tell you now. But and they were approved by voters through an initiative.
Right.
How do performance audits fit into the work of this office?
Well, I have a director in charge of performance auditing, and every year, every biennium, we come up with a game plan of what things we're going to look at. And it's soup to nuts. No, not to be funny, but it's everything. We can look at education issues, we can look at agricultural issues, we can look at economic development issues, or anything in between. And it can be something that is generated by a legislator who may say, I'd really like you to look at this. Or it could be something that is top of the fold of the Seattle Times, or it could be something that that our staff have found that crosses multiple governments that can provide value. My concern always with performance auditing, does it provide value? Because what we do is we opine. We tell you what we found. It's a research project in many ways, and then it's incumbent upon that government or that entity to be able to make the course corrections or the changes, or apply the recommendations of the best practices we may put into those performance auditing. So it is a way to look at performance and how governments or programs are functioning. And it's provided a lot of value over time. We've looked at a number of different things. We have law enforcement is another one that we've done performance auditing in. But when you go back to the financial audits, the one thing we've learned through the last I'd say this last year, is it's important for people to know that why the financial audits are so important is because it's about having strong internal controls. We can't emphasize that enough. And strong oversight. So you have to couple the two together. And I think sometimes people are not aware of their responsibilities. They may be in charge of an entity that they're volunteer board, or they're ostensibly a volunteer board, or they don't have the financial backgrounds to really dig down and make sure that organization, that school district, that whatever, that water district, fire district, sewer district is spending their money appropriately. So we do a lot of training. And I'm very proud of the work that we're doing on the non-audit side to help the public, but to help our clients, which are governments, know how to do a better job of monitoring and oversight.
What the best practices are so that there aren't problems. Well, let's dive into some of the recent audits. And I want to start with something that's been very much in the news on a federal level, which is federal funding to state-subsidized childcare. The president has gone after Minnesota and several blue states for allegations of fraud in that system. And my understanding is that your office has struggled to get from the Department of Children, Youth, and Families the data set that you need to do a fulsome audit. For several years, this has been a recurring issue, and it's my understanding that really for the first year, you've now been able to, and you've just released an audit that actually is based on the data set you need. So why don't we just give us a little history here of how we kind of got to this point?
Sure. So starting in 2021, we had to issue our first what's called a disclaimer of opinion for the Child Care Development Fund. So thinking back to our single audit, what I described, we're auditing all the federal programs. That's one of many. So when we disclaim on a program, that means we can't issue an opinion about whether they're complying with federal requirements. Why that happened was from 2021 up until 2024, DCYF, Department of Children, Youth, and Families, was not able to provide us with the child level data, and I'll explain what that means, in order for us to audit to the federal requirements. Why that child level data is important is because the child care program in Washington is funded by many different funding sources. The CCDF program is one federal grant. The TANF program, another federal grant, also pays for child care. And then there's state funding. So what we weren't able to obtain from DCYF was if a payment was made to a provider, what proportion of that payment was paid from each of those different funding sources. We need that to be able to say it was spent properly. And that's what they weren't able to provide us.
Why do we know why they weren't able to provide this for so many years?
They were doing what they referred to as fund level accounting adjustments, so very high level adjustments, transferring expenditures from one funding source to another at high levels or significant levels. I'm not saying that was improper. That's something I would highly encourage them to speak to. What I am saying, though, is the level of detail we needed as the auditor wasn't there.
And if I could just jump in here, I really do believe that we have new leadership at DCYF. We have a new governor, and I think there's a commitment to reducing any findings that a state agency would have. And I think the new director or secretary of DCYF wants to do that and reduce the number of findings that may come up in that particular agency. And I know the governor and his staff feel the same way. So that's a plus from my point of view as the state auditor, to have people looking at the same and addressing the same, trying to address the same issues.
And for this year, you were able to get eyes on the data you needed. I should note that between 21 and 2024, the state auditor's office questioned more than $400 million in child care and development fund spending, again, citing insufficient documentation to verify compliance. For this latest review or audit, kind of at a glance, there were about $10 million in estimated, again, questioned costs, 67% overpayment rate in audits. I want you to explain what that is. Sure. There was some lack of system integration, and let's see if there was one other data point. And the state audit flagged some ongoing internal control failures. But what would you say jumps out for you as sort of the key findings here?
Yeah, so I will describe what we found and then what that means to us.
That means, yeah.
So how we conduct this audit is we send out attendance records requests to actual child care providers in the communities, and we send letters requesting that they send copies of attendance records to support the billings and the payments they receive from DCYF as part of the child care program. Some of the providers didn't respond with records. Some responded, and we determined that the amounts paid were not appropriate. They were not supported. Things like field trip fees weren't supported, or parent signatures weren't on the documents. When that happens, what we call those in the audit world is question costs. So what we found was about $3,500 of actual question costs from the sample that we did, because we only take a sample of these thousands and thousands of
and
payments.
Then you extrapolate.
Correct, yeah. So when we extrapolate, it was about $27 million for the CCDF program and another $9 million or $10 million or so from the TANF program to get to about $37 million in estimated question costs for the child care program.
Out of a program that costs how much? Do you know off the top of your head?
I do, yeah. So the federal share in 2025 was about $370 million. That's not the state share. That's about $400 million of state money. But we're only talking in this audit about the federal. Yeah.
And I think it's important to note that there are 7,000 child care entities in the state of Washington. And these child care programs or facilities service the working families of Washington state. So both parents are working, or single parents that need child care. And so it's a program that's important that we provide that kind of support for our working families.
Obviously, the concern is, and the allegation has been in other states, that there are essentially ghost children that are being funded. They don't really exist. They're not in the child care center. Is there any evidence of that happening here?
What I can tell you, based on our audit, I can't say that there's fraud. But what I can say is, based on the results, there are situations that we have recommended DCYF follow up on. So that would be, especially providers that don't respond with records. To me, that's an indicator that more work needs to be done. And there's another layer to the oversight of this program and investigating, potential fraud, for example. That's actually done by the Department of Social and Health Services, DSHS. They have an Office of Fraud and Accountability, and that particular department is responsible for doing the legwork and the actual investigating of allegations of fraud. So we've recommended in our audit findings that DCYF follow up on all of the things that we found, and that could maybe mean turning those over to DSHS to do some work.
My understanding is that in 2025, this is based on some reporting out of Minnesota, that the Office of Inspector General there found that about 1,100 child care centers that were sampled had an 11% error rate, essentially, in payments made, and the national average is 4%. I guess the federal government allows up to 10%. Were you able to determine in your audit what our error rate from a percentage standpoint is?
Actually, I'd point to DCYF's own audits that's cited in our findings. So they do their own subsidy audits, and they're after the fact, and that's one of the recommendations we have, is to do them more timely. But the error rate they found of provider overpayments, 67% of the ones that they actually audited, and then I think it was 22% of the payments that they audited were overpayments. So 22% is the error rate.
What is the 67%?
The 67 is how many of the providers that they audited actually had an overpayment. The 22% is the dollars.
Dollar amount. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's, using this 10% sort of national threshold, presuming that that's correct. Well, I'm sorry, what was it again, 27%?
I think it was 22% is what their error rate
What is that? I mean, you're the state auditor.
Yeah.
This is a program that is obviously vital to working families in this state, and something that Democrats who are in charge of this state have made a priority. And yet, what we're hearing is that it's very hard to account for every dollar in these programs. What's your, as an elected official, as the state auditor, what's your takeaway here? And what would your message back to DCYF be?
Well, we just met with DCYF yesterday, actually, and went over every single item that was found, that we found in this audit of this particular program, and the foster care program as well, I believe. And so what my statement is, we can get this resolved. We can reduce the number of findings. I believe that it can be done. But I do think there are things that DCYF needs to do. One of the recommendations I know that we had in our report was they have preventative, as what Jim was alluding to, preventative investigations, so that they create a system, and they have to have policies in place to do this, that they look at these significant challenges that they've had in the past and address them. And what they will tell you, people will need to read those reports, because I think those reports are informative, but they have a response to each one of these things that we mentioned.
And a big response is they say they need more funding.
They do. They very well, if they only have one person, I can't remember what the statistic was, but they had like one person reviewing one action, and they need more than that. And maybe they adjust their work,
Right.
The number of people that are working at the organization, at the agency, and I think they can do better.
Jim, am I understanding correctly that the way that their payment systems work is that they are not directly linked to attendance records?
Yeah, that's a great point to hit on. So the recommendation that we have to really improve oversight and accountability is, Pat used the word preventative controls. So that means making sure that the support's there before the money goes out the door. Because once it does, there's a cost to either recouping, auditing, following up. All of that costs money, right? So our suggestion to really improve oversight is to make sure those records are there ahead of time before they make the payment.
And before we go to break and wrap up on this particular audit, it seems again, Pat McCarthy, that the stakes are really high. I mean, the President of the United States, not just his staff, but the President of the United States is paying attention to how federal child care dollars are being spent, especially in blue states. We're one of them. They have pulled funding from a number of states, not Washington yet. But do you have that same sense that this is a program that seems to be of great importance to political leaders in this state, and also is under quite a lot of scrutiny right now from the federal government?
I'll say a few things. I'll say that I believe that the leadership now at DCYF is fully engaged. And I say that because I've been fully engaged. I normally don't go to the entrance conference, the exit conferences, but I have been leaning in because of the importance of this and because we want to have a program that services our working families. I would feel that as a citizen of Washington State. So we need to make sure that there isn't any abuse, right? So I believe in that, and I believe the more controls we have in place, the more attention that we have to fixing these issues is important, and I believe our governor feels the same way. So
have you had a conversation with the governor about this?
I have.
And what have you told him?
I've said that this is a concern because this has a national focus on not just this program, but any of the programs that we have in social health services that maybe the federal government may want to claw back some of that money.
If
I
you
have
can't
said that
account for
very
these
thing.
dollars,
Right.
you may lose these.
You may lose those dollars. So, and we're the truth tellers. We tell the truth, so we're putting it out there. It's our job to do that. And so I think it's important, and that's why I think there is improvement. Let me put it that way. There is some improvement we are seeing in 2025 that we have not seen in the years before.
Okay, and it sounds like more work to be done.
More work to be done.
Okay, let's take a break. When we return, how well is Washington spending federal dollars, state dollars? When we return, we'll continue to look at some of the recent audit results. Back after this.
Hi, I'm Angela Nolasco. Join me for a look back at the policies that passed and didn't pass in the 2026 legislative session. That's Legislative Year in Review, now airing on TVW and streaming on tvw.org.
Welcome back to Inside Olympia. Joining me once again is State Auditor Pat McCarthy and Jim Brownell, her Assistant Director for State Audit and Special Investigations. I want to go back to something that you said a few minutes ago, Auditor McCarthy, and that was about the importance of being able to have good oversight. And so I want to take you both to another audit, this one looking at a state program and state funding, I believe, and that was at the Department of Commerce. It was their Digital Navigator program. And it seems like it stands out as a prime example, if you will, for what you don't want to do. This was a performance audit that looked at this program, and it repeatedly failed basic accountability standards, undermining what was a nearly $100 million effort to expand digital access for unserved communities, which is a key area of concern because if you don't have access to digital services, it's very hard to compete in this economy. You've described this as a case study in how weak oversight can derail well-intentioned public programs. So before we talk about kind of what the audit found and what ended up happening to this program, I'll start with you and just how this one stands out for you.
To me, and I have used this word, this was an egregious failure, an egregious failure. I think the report that we did highlights the accountability report we did prior to the issuance of the performance audit report really showcased, both of them showcase of the problems that are inherent in the digital navigation program. And the problem is that it had noble intent, and then to fail so abysmally, to me, by not only what was not done properly with DCY or with the Department of Commerce, but then also the lack of communication or the lack of responsibility that the subrecipients, we call them, were doing with regards to the program. So,
Part of the challenge with Commerce is it's a pass-through agency.
right.
It's then sending that money out to people, expecting them to do what they're supposed to do with those dollars. And if there's not accountability, it can go sideways really fast. Let me talk about some of the findings here with this, again, particular program. Commerce bypassed competitive contracting practices, failed to properly vet contractors, and some subcontractors lacked clear documentation for key grant decisions. Contracts were often vague or incomplete. The agency failed to monitor contractor performance, approved payments without verifying that services were being delivered. Grant selection process raised red flags, with Commerce choosing lower ranked applicants over higher ranked ones. Jim, what do you think was this blatant corruption? Was this incompetent? Commerce has programs left, right, and all over the place doing this on a daily basis. What went wrong here? What's the root cause if you were to do that analysis?
I think my analysis is just being overwhelmed. That particular agency for many years has expanded its book of business.
It's kind of become a grab bag agency.
Kind of conglomerate of so many things, and there's only so many people within that agency that have the time and resources to review every payment that comes in. So I think what really led to this was, as far as the payments go, was a lack of oversight and the diligence really needed to verify all of these payments were supported before they issued the payments. In other words, did you get what you paid for? And that wasn't done.
And I think it's fair to say that that was then. It has multiple leaders that have led Department of Commerce in Washington State. And I think the last leader at the Department of Commerce, Joe Wynn, came in and said, I want to deal with this. I'm hitting it the nail straight on the head. Stop the funding from even being issued, which he took a lot of heat for doing that.
Because again, it's an important program.
It's an important program, and people were invested in it.
Yeah.
And so, but they do have a new director, because Joe's left now, and they do have a new director. And that director, I believe, is talking the right talk, which is meaning we're going to deal with this. We're going to have that oversight. We're going to have those internal controls. We're going to have the policies that ensure that we give the appropriate oversight.
I will note that Governor Ferguson did, as you noted, installed new Commerce leadership, vetoed continued funding, and effectively ended that program. But it is a case study in what not to do. I'm glad you mentioned Joe Wynn, because when he was on the program, one of the frustrations he had is that he said that so much of what his staff was doing was the paper trail, and he wanted them to be freed up to do more of the work of delivering on the promise of these programs. And so I want to ask you, Pat McCarthy, about that balance act of, yes, we need to account for these dollars and we have to have good systems in place, but if all we're doing is the accountability, don't we lose the forest through the trees? And then how do we make sure that we're actually moving the needle? How, as an auditor, do you think about that?
Well, I think that the public expects accountability in government. And when you started the program talking about trust in government, how do we provide trust in government? And the way we do that is to provide that accountability and that transparency. And the only way you can do that is having a system in place and policies in place and oversight in place that make sure that what those dollars are intended to be spent on are spent appropriately, and that there is a check and balance. And while I think one could say it can be overwhelming or this or that, I think it is incumbent upon us, those of us that work in government, to be able to provide that trust. Is
there any thinking that technology, and it's a little, I'll bring in AI, is there an opportunity for these new technologies to help free up some staff time, help with accountability and daylight into how money is spent?
I totally agree.
Yeah, I really hope in not too distant future, especially when reviewing invoices and things like that, integrating AI into our financial systems at some point is going to help with efficiencies, and maybe that'll free up resources for those individuals used to process payments that can, move more into the oversight. Or I think what you're getting at, Austin, is the intention of the program, and measuring outcomes, versus just making sure an invoice is signed.
Yeah, and also if the person who's responsible for ensuring that the money's being well spent in compliance is also the person trying to oversee the program and its effectiveness, there can be maybe a natural tension there too.
And that's why we've created a bunch of workbooks, manuals that talk about segregation of duties, to talk about purchase cards. How do you handle this if you're a tiny little entity or a tiny division? Who's doing what part of the process and who's doing the second part? We had that when I was the county auditor. We had that where we had cash drawers.
Yeah.
And if you consolidate positions, how do you ensure that one person is shutting down the system before the next person comes and works out of it? So I really think it's doable. I just think technology could really help in many ways. And we use data analytics in our office as well, and we will be implementing AI on some very specific use cases.
Do you know what those use cases are yet?
No.
What's the timeline?
Well, we have a policy, and it's coming, I think within the next few months. We've been very deliberate. I've been probably the one that's dragged my feet the most because I'm afraid of AI.
You don't want slop.
No, yeah, garbage in, garbage out, no. And we want to make sure that we have controls in place. So we haven't instituted it yet. I've put together a task force, internal. I've put together a committee. We have a person that's leading that, who's the director of our performance audit, is going to be in charge of that committee. We've been working with WATEC and with the state committee that's looking at AI and how it's implemented. We have many policies now have been written. So until we get all that in place, we're not going to be sending it to our 500 employees to go ahead and use it at will. It will have a lot of controls and a lot of safeguards.
Before we get to a third example of the kind of work that this office is doing, let me ask you a bigger picture question. There was a fraud incident case up in King County, and now King County is considering possibly standing up an Office of Inspector General. A lot of states have OIGs. Obviously, the federal government does. We don't. Has there been any discussion of that? Do you think we should have an OIG?
We have at least JLARC and my
Which is the
office.
Joint Legislative
Yes.
Audit and Review Committee.
Right,
I believe I
who
got
is
that
an
one right.
arm, is an arm of the legislature, but they do a lion's share of work. To me, that would be almost over duplicative.
One advantage, I think my understanding of OIGs is that they have subpoena power.
We have subpoena power
You do
in
too.
the state auditor.
So you don't think it's needed? You
I
think we've
do
got
not
the-
think, standing up, I felt that way when it was discussed that some states were putting together a DOJ, because we do
Yes.
performance auditing to do the very thing that I think it was intended, which is to find those efficiencies in the better way that people can be effective and efficient in what they're doing.
So you don't think we need a separate OIG or a separate DOJ?
Correct.
Okay. So I was a little surprised that the state auditor's office took a look at the handling of the case of Manny Ellis, who was died at the hands of Tacoma police several years ago. Under what auspices or authority did this audit, and that even seems like the wrong word to use, but this review happen?
Well, we decided to do it because the governor had, at that time, had determined that the state patrol would oversee the investigation that was done by Pierce County. Because remember, you have an investigation of the event. Now, it's important for people to know, we in the state auditor's office, in doing the work of use of deadly force, do not opine on whether it was justified or not. What we do is we opine on whether it was, the investigation of it was done properly. So we felt it was incumbent upon us, and we were required, because it was incumbent upon us, to actually audit the State Patrol's investigation of the use of deadly force with regards to Manny Ellis. So do you want to add anything to that?
I think you covered it well.
What was the finding? What was the takeaway?
The takeaway for us was the State Patrol was substantially compliant with all the rules. And thinking back then, the rules had just been implemented. So there were some findings, what we consider minor, such as the community representatives are supposed to be notified X amount of days before the press releases go out. There was also some issues with validating access to the case file within State Patrol's own systems.
Somebody got in there and it wasn't clear who it was, or?
No, their system just didn't have the records, the documentation, like an audit trail to show who would have accessed.
Who would have accessed.
Yeah, and actually it's a concern and recommendation we have for a number of our IITs, independent investigative teams across the state. It's a technology issue, but happy to say that the State Patrol took quick action and are working with a new system. So to your question, they were substantially compliant in that particular audit.
Now, we've just had the Office of Independent Investigations, former Director Roger Rogoff on the program, along with Representative Deborah Entenman, who was the sponsor of the legislation that stood up that new statewide office that's supposed to be taking over from the IITs. And it's just kind of getting going, even though it's been several years. Will your office be auditing their investigations in the same way?
We will.
And looking for compliance?
We will.
What's the timeline for that? I mean, they're only operational right now in one region of the state, soon to be two, and they've only, I think, issued 3 reports. So what point do you think you need to start taking a look?
Well, I don't know where it is on the schedule. You may know that.
I sure do. We've already engaged with the OII just this last month to start their first audit. So we're working through a data sharing agreement. We're working on understanding the policies and procedures that their investigators are following to make sure that the audits are consistent with how we're currently doing the other audits of IITs.
We've done 88 reports since up to the end of 2025.
How did this come about? This does not seem like the normal book of business for the state
No,
auditor's
it's
office.
unique. It's nationally, I think we are the only audit shop that is doing this kind of audit work.
So the legislature essentially put this in your lap and said, we want, again, you're not reviewing police use of deadly force cases to determine if the police did the right thing in terms of using force. You're looking at process and did they comply with law?
Transparency, communication, independence, and credibility. Did that investigative team follow all those? And then all of those, the criteria set by the Criminal Justice
Training Commission.
Training Commission.
They write rules.
Yeah.
So they write the rules, and then we go in and we
So
audit to that.
the Manny Ellis report is I think the most recent. On balance, on whole, how many did you say?
88.
88. What's been the story that's emerged?
The story has been substantial compliance. If you look statistically across our state, we've seen very few where there was egregious noncompliance with those rules. And the ones that I do recall were years ago. It was just as the rules were just getting into place. Working with the law enforcement community has been great. They have been receptive to recommendations.
They weren't at first.
Well,
I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, there was uncertainty, I think, by all parties.
Why is the state auditor's office calling us?
We'd actually hired a contractor to begin this work, and then quickly we were able to assume it because we are compliance auditors. But there, I think, is 230 cases in total since 2020 that require audit. And as Pat said, we've published 88 reports. So we still have quite a backlog to get through. We got a great team that's getting caught up, but they still occur. So our backlog is slowly diminishing.
Dwindling.
And
Okay.
I think it provides this outside independent set of eyes that's really looking at the credibility of the investigation. And I think that helps to increase trust in government again.
I want to ask you about these performance audits, again, voter approved, and different than the financial audits in the sense that they come with a set of recommendations, and the entity or the agency or the program that's being evaluated can take them or leave them. What is your sense of the openness and receptiveness to findings of performance audits? And is there any evidence now that this has been on the books for a number of years that by doing performance audits, we're actually getting a return on this investment, and we're seeing programs say, oh, you're right, we're going to fix this?
Well, I know a specific case,
Yeah,
I think.
I'd love a
that-
good example.
Okay, well, we had, there was a concern about the sexual assault kits that the State Patrol was woefully behind.
Yeah, they were backlogged.
Yeah, and it was a concern by one of our state legislators, who was very.
Tina Orwell.
Correct, Tina Orwell. And so she wanted us to look at that, and we thought it was a really good thing for us to look at. And when we initially did our first report, it showed that they were behind. The State Patrol went to the state legislature, said we need more funding for no more expansion of the program, the labs that do the work. And we went back and audited them again, and they were almost to, I want to say 90-something compliant. They had decreased the backlog at almost the 80 or 90%.
So if that is one perhaps shining success story, is that
The norm?
the norm or the exception?
I think that one is probably out there way in front. But I do think that by doing these performance audits, we are helping them see exactly what they can do to make improvements. Let's look at best practices. It can't always be we need more funding. It has to be that we look at what can we do with the resources that we have to make improvements. And sometimes I don't know, what would you say? I'm trying to think of a good answer to that. If I had our performance director, he would probably say, yes, it definitely brings value
Do you
to
have
those.
the money and the people to do these performance audits frequently, robustly? You've got, I'm sure, a long list of ones you want to do. Are you able to get to these and get them done in a reasonable amount of time?
Well, I think when the voters passed, and I was one of them, passed in 2005, allowing the state auditor's office to do performance auditing, I think that was a clarion call to the state auditor's office, that you need to look at the performance, not just the compliance, but you need to look at the performance of local governments and state agencies. And I think over time, the state auditor's office has done different strategies, and what we have done, I hired somebody out of Kansas who is a performance auditor for the state of Kansas, and we have instituted a number of activities to be able to increase the value of those performance audits, and to make sure that when we're done with the performance audit, that we've developed enough of a rapport and a relationship, and we've given good advice. We've been able to study the issue, whatever that may be, look at what other states are doing, and give that information to the stakeholders who are involved with that particular issue.
Let me just drill down on this, ask you one more question. JLARC, which we talked about a moment ago, the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee, did a 2025 status report that showed the state auditor's office made 3 new recommendations to the legislature in 2024, and that unresolved recommendations from prior years were still being tracked. That same report shows that some recommendations were adopted, some were introduced into bills but not adopted, and others saw no formal action. That makes follow-through one of the most important accountability storylines, it seems. And so these, I guess, were specific recommendations to the legislature, but what's the follow-through from the legislature when you guys issue findings and reports?
Well, I don't have a percentage on that.
What's your sense
My
of the sort
sense.
of receptiveness and the responsiveness?
I would say that the state auditor's office, since I've been there, has developed a great respect amongst legislators, both in the House and the Senate, both on the D side and the R side. And because of that, I think they accept and they read our reports with interest and value, because they have been very receptive to making sure we have the appropriate funding to do the things that we need to do. Now, with performance audit, it has a funding mechanism, a funding stream. But with all of the work that we do, especially in cybersecurity, because we are using performance dollars to also do this cybersecurity work as well. So it is providing a value to all of our governments that we're doing. And I believe you'd have to ask the legislator and both sides of the aisle in both houses on what their impression is on the value of what the state auditor's office brings. But I believe it's good because they've been very responsive.
In the couple minutes we have left, I do want to ask one or both of you to comment on the cybersecurity audits you do. Those can be a little bit boring, but boy, the stakes are really high. So what are you finding when you dig into cybersecurity levels of protection in these agencies?
Well,
or governments?
I will tell you, it's the #1 source for loss in government in Washington is cybersecurity
is that
losses. Right? And since 2016, cyber losses at all government types totaled more than $38 million. And if you just look at a very small city called Newport, which is a city in northeast Washington, it just lost $330,000 when a fraudster impersonated the city's insurer. So everyone's vulnerable. The cybersecurity work by our public hospitals, that's why we do these cybersecurity audits, whether it's a full-on cybersecurity audit where we're doing white hat penetration testing, whether we're doing ransomware audits like you would maybe at a hospital, critical infrastructure audits. We've done a number of those, and we received funding from the state legislature to do more, especially at the local level, because we have a backlog of those governments that want us to do this work. And we've even created a thing called cyber checkup. So if you're a really small entity and you really need to you don't have the funds to do or hire a cyber expert in your little entity, we'll come in and we'll give you some training and we'll give you some checklists so that you could at least know who's responsible. And everyone's responsible in government. It's not just your IT team. It's every employee needs to be cyber aware.
And the fraudsters and hackers are always getting more sophisticated, and AI is making it easier to trick people. So your job is getting harder. Just before we wrap up, I know that the two largest local governments in the state, Seattle and King County, recently were audited. They got clean audits with some areas to improve. But we just had Sound Transit's director, Dow Constantine, on. And a lot of money being spent there. Sound Transit being audited?
Oh, I think they're on the next biennial audit. But yes, we have audited Sound Transit. You can't audit all of Sound Transit because if you audited all of Sound Transit, you'd have no money to audit anybody else.
It would take you 10 years. Jim, just before we go, anything about the Seattle and King County ones that jumps out, or just sort of what you're seeing in local government, just briefly?
Well, my book of business is state government.
State, okay.
Yeah, so I don't really have any specifics I can offer.
Let me just, in under a minute, start with kind of the question end with the question I started with. Are taxpayers getting a return on their investment? Are we getting bang for our buck?
They are. I believe they are. Now, and I don't want people to think I'm Pollyanna because I'm not. I can be very critically constructive, but I will tell you that just if you look at how government functioned when we had the pandemic, we still functioned. We still functioned in the auditor's office. We still did almost 2,000 audits during COVID. So government is getting their money's worth by having this separate set of eyes.
Okay. I'm going to stop you there.
Yeah.
Pat McCarthy, Washington State's Auditor. Jim Brownell, the Assistant Director for State Audit and Special Investigations. Thank you both.
Yeah.
Very interesting conversation. Appreciate you being here. Thank you for watching Inside Olympia. We'll see you again next week.